Mr. Burling continues. I'm delighted about this engagement and I hope it won't be too long before you're married. And I want to say this. There's a good deal of silly talk about these days, but I speak as a hard-headed, practical man of business. A man who has to take risks and know what he's about. I say we ignore this silly pessimistic talk. When you marry, you'll be marrying at a very good time. Yes, a very good time. And soon it'll be an even better time. Last month, just because the miners came out on strike, there's a lot of wild talk about possible labour trouble in the near future. Don't worry. We've passed the worst of it. We employers, at last, are coming together to see that our interests and the interests of capital are properly protected. And we're in for a time of steadily increasing prosperity. I believe you're right, sir. What about war? I'm glad you mentioned it, Eric. I'm coming to that. Just because the Kaiser makes a speech or two, or a few German officers have too much to drink and begin talking nonsense, you'll hear some people say that war's inevitable. And I say to you, fiddlesticks. The Germans don't want war. Nobody wants war, except for some half-civilised folk out in the Balkans. And why? There's too much at stake these days. Everything to lose and nothing to gain by war. Yes, I know, but still, just let me finish, Eric. You've a lot to learn yet. And I'm talking as a hard-headed, practical man of business, and I say there isn't a chance of war. The world's developing so fast, it'll make war impossible. Just look at the progress we're making. In a year or two, we'll have aeroplanes that will be able to go anywhere. And look at the way the automobile's making headway bigger and faster all the time. And then ships. Why, a friend of mine went over this new liner last week, the Titanic. She sails next week. 46,800 tons. 46,800 tons. New York in 5 days, and every luxury, and unsinkable. Absolutely unsinkable. And that's what you've got to keep your eye on. Facts like that. Progress like that. And not a few German officers talking nonsense. And a few scaremongers making a fuss about nothing. Now you three young people, just listen to this. And remember what I'm telling you now. In 20 or 30 years' time, let's say in 1940, you'll be giving a little party like this, your son or daughter getting engaged, and I tell you, by that time, you'll be living in a world that have forgotten all these capital versus labour agitations and all these silly little war scares. There'll be peace and prosperity and rapid progress everywhere, except of course Russia, which will always be naturally behind. Arthur! Oh yes, my dear, I know I'm talking too much, but these youngsters, just remember what I said. We can't let these Bernard Shawses and H.G. Welleses do all the talking. We hard-headed practical businessmen must have some hearing sometimes. And we don't guess. We've had experience and we know. Yes, of course, dear. Well, don't keep Geraldine here too long. Eric, I want you a minute. Sheila and Eric go out. Burling and Gerald sit down together. Cigar? No, thanks. I can't really enjoy them. Oh, you know what? You don't know what you're missing. I like a good cigar. Help yourself. Thank you. Thanks. By the way, there's something I'd like to mention. In strict confidence while we're by ourselves. I've an idea that your mother, Lady Croft, while she doesn't object to my girl, feels that you might have done rather better for yourself socially. No, Gerald, it's all right. I don't blame her. She comes from an old country family, landed people and so forth, so it's only natural. But what I wanted to say is, there's a fair chance that I might find my way into the next honours list. Just a knighthood, of course. Oh, I say, congratulations. Thanks, but it's a bit too early for that, so don't say anything. I've had a hint or two. You see, I was Lord Mayor here 2 years ago when royalty visited us, and I've always been regarded as a sound, useful party man. So, I gather there's a very good chance of a knighthood. So long as we behave ourselves, don't get into the police court or start a scandal, eh? You seem to have a nice, well-behaved family. We think we are. So, if that's the only obstacle, sir, I think you might as well accept my congratulations now. No, I couldn't do that. And don't say anything yet. Not even to my mother. I know she'd be delighted. Well, when she comes back, you might drop a hint to her. And you can promise her that we'll try and keep out of trouble for the next few months. What's the joke? Started telling stories? No. Want another glass of port? Yes, please. Mother says we mustn't stay too long, but I don't think it matters. I've left him talking about clothes again. You'd think a girl had never had any clothes before she gets married. Women are potty about them. Yes, but you've got to remember, my boy, that clothes means something quite different to a woman. Not just something to wear. Not only something to make them look prettier, but, well, a sort of sign or token of their self-respect. That's true. I remember. What do you remember? Nothing. Nothing? Sounds a bit fishy to me. Yes, you don't know what some of these boys get up to nowadays. More money to spend and time to spend than I had when I was Eric's age. They worked as hard in those days and kept us short of cash. Thought even then we broke out and had a bit of fun sometimes. I bet you did. But this is the point. I don't want to lecture you two young fellows again. But what so many of you don't seem to understand now, when things are so much easier, is that a man has to make his own way. He has to look after himself and his family too, of course, when he has one. And so long as he does that, he won't come to much harm. But the way some of these cranks talking right now, you'd think everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we're all mixed up like bees in a hive. Community and all that nonsense. Take my word for it, you youngsters, and I've learnt at the good hard school of experience that a man has to mind his own business and look after himself and his own and... We hear the sharp ring of a doorbell and Burling stops to listen. Somebody at the door. Edna will answer it. Have another glass of port, Gerald, and then we'll join the ladies. That'll stop me giving good advice. You've barred it on a bit thick tonight, Father. Special occasion. Feeling contented for once. I wanted you to have the benefit of my experience. Edna enters. Please, sir. An inspector's called. An inspector? What kind of inspector? A police inspector. He says his name's Inspector Gould. Don't know him. Does he want to see me? Yes, sir. He says it's important. All right, Edna, show him in here. Give us some more light. Edna does, and then goes out. I'm still on the bench. It might be something about a warrant. Sure to be. Unless Eric's been up to something. That would be a bit awkward, wouldn't it? Very. Oh, what do you mean? Oh, only something we were talking about when you were out. Joke, really. I still don't think it's very funny. What's the matter with you? Nothing. Edna, opening the door and announcing Inspector Gould. The inspector enters and Edna goes, closing the door after her. The inspector need not be a big man, but he creates at once an impression of massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness. He is a man in his 50s, dressed in plain darkish suit of the period. He speaks carefully, weightily, and has a disconcerting habit of looking at the person before he actually speaks to them. Mr. Burling. Yes, sit down, Inspector. Thank you, sir. Have a glass of port or a little whisky. No, thank you, Mr. Burling. I'm on duty. You're new, aren't you? Yes, sir. Only recently transferred. I thought you must be. I was an alderman for years. Lord Mayor 2 years ago, and I'm still on the bench, so I know the Brumley police officers pretty well, and I thought I'd never seen you before. Quite so. Well, what can I do for you? Some trouble about a warrant? No, Mr. Burling. Well, what is it then? I'd like some information, if you don't mind, Mr. Burling.